So, in 1994, when talking about professional sports teams, Jerry Seinfeld said, quote, "You're rooting for clothes when you get right down to it." And this makes sense. As years go on, players change, coaches change, stadiums change, executives change. Sometimes even the cities where teams play end up changing. But the uniforms, for the most part, stay the same. Uh, I mean, as time goes on, there will be tweaks and redesigns and whatever, but for the most part, the uniforms will sort of come together and tell a story of the history and of the overall story of the history of the organization and of the city that that team plays in. And I love uniforms. I think they're great. I think they're awesome. And they're sort of why I'm up here today. They're a really big passion of mine. So these are the thoughts, feelings, and confessions of a uniforms geek. And by geek, I mean me, Trayton Miller. So I think about uniforms in the same way that we think about art. So here we have two different pieces of art. On the left, we have Dancer at the Bar by Venera Botero. And on the right, we have Nude Descending a Staircase #2 by Marcel Duchamp. So both of these, obviously, as you can see, very different paintings. The artists from different countries, they're in very different styles, and made in very different times. But as you can tell, these paintings, they're of relatively similar dimensions, but also they feature a woman, now one more modernistically than the other one, but they both feature a woman as the main protagonist of this painting, very much in the similar way that a sports uniform, say a football uniform, is in the end just a football uniform, whereas both of these are both still paintings. They have similar templates, but far different execution. So let's talk about some basketball. So here I have a picture from a game earlier this year between the Chicago Bulls and Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the Chicago Bulls have worn these uniforms, these white uniforms, without change since 1985. They've worn these throughout the Michael Jordan era when they won 6 championships. And as all that time went on, people started to associate these uniforms with winning and with tradition and with that sort of excellence. And that's why they still wear them today. They mean so many things to the fan base. And on the other side, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee had their uniforms redone in 2015 by a Brooklyn-based design firm. And as basketball junkies will tell you, Milwaukee has played with a ton of different color combinations in their history. They were purple and green, as weird as that sounds, during the 90s. They wore red and green in the early 2000s, and now they're wearing green and cream. Now, a lot of people don't know why they switched to green and cream. It ends up being that the design firm was inspired by the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee is known as Cream City because all of the major buildings in the city are made with cream brick. That's pretty cool. And also as well, if you can sort of tell up here, there's a little blue band right up under Jabari Parker's armpit. I know that's probably the most awkward statement I'll make today. Just work with me here. Those are a reference to the Great Lakes, which are very important to the geography of the state of Wisconsin. And these little details are what keeps me going in sports uniforms. These little stories and these little anecdotes that come with the creation and the history of these uniforms that make them really special to me. So at this point, you may be asking, but what makes a great uniform? Well, thank you for asking that question. I appreciate it. I was sort of counting on it. I have a theory, 3 parts to it, of what makes a great sports uniform. The first one, you have to have a goal in mind. So let's talk about Rutgers football, and that'll be the first and last time you'll have someone tell you that today. If anyone from New Jersey is watching this, either in this crowd or on the internet, I'm sorry. These were Rutgers uniforms in the early to mid-2000s. Mid-2000s, early 2010s. They were a lot to deal with. They use these battle-scarred silver helmets with these battle-scarred shoulders. Those markups aren't actually from football. That's like real. They put that on there to make them look like medieval soldiers and stuff. And they have this very medieval number font that has like silver on it that's like reflective. And it was a lot, guys. It was a lot to watch. And Rutgers got a new football coach this past year, and he wanted to get back to the fundamentals. He wanted everyone to know, all right, Rutgers, instead of having all these, being so flashy, they want to get back to playing, above all, playing good football. So they switched the uniforms to this. Much more traditional set. There's still some modern little twists to it, like the pattern on the sleeve caps. But for the most part, this is a much more traditional look. And what we were trying to communicate with this is that they're getting back to the fundamentals and letting everyone know that this is a new era in Rutgers football. And that's really important, and that's an example of having a goal in mind. The second thing is you have to use color to accomplish that goal. So let's talk about Seattle. This is the same face that Clint Dempsey makes in all photos. I couldn't find one that he wasn't making this face. So these are the Seattle Sounders. This is the soccer team in Seattle. They love this neon and lime green color. It's a lot to deal with, but it makes more sense why they use this color whenever you start thinking about the city of Seattle. So Seattle is this incredibly modern city. They want to be on the cutting edge of all trends and social trends and fashion and technology, all this sorts of stuff. And they really associate with this color because it's not a very traditional color. It's kind of bizarre, and it's very in your face and very almost futuristic. And so they love this color both on the Seattle Sounders and on the Seattle Seahawks, the football team, because it's something different. It's something that no one else does, and it's not something that you see every day. And that really connects to both the city of Seattle and the way they want to see their sports teams. And finally, you have to distinguish yourself. You have to find something in your history of that sports team and of that organization that sets you apart. So let's talk for a second about Northwestern football. In 2012, Under Armour completely redid the Northwestern football uniforms and put this stripe in the middle of the football uniforms. And most people were like, that's a weird thing to do. That's not where stripes go. But it did have a purpose, because these were the uniforms, I don't know how well you can see, these were the uniforms that 1928 Northwestern Wildcats. That pattern, the skinny, fat, skinny striping pattern, is known in the design community as the Northwestern stripe. Northwestern were the first ones to wear the striping pattern on a football uniform. And since they were the originators of this, Under Armour decided to go all out and include these in the most eye-catching ways possible on their new uniforms. And so far, I think it's really cool because it's distinguishable and no one else really has a claim to the striping pattern in the same way that Northwestern does. And so these three steps to creating a great uniform, having a goal, using color to establish that goal, and also distinguishing yourself from the rest, I feel like these three are done the best by a particular team from the history of sports, and that's the 1980 San Diego Padres. Look at how cool they are. God. Amazing. They were so groovy and incredible. Brown, gold, and orange are a very unique color palette, of course, but also it really encapsulates like the city of San Diego, because it's a place where there's never clouds in the sky, it never rains. It's very sunshine and happy and friendly every day. So gold and orange really brightens up the look. Brown is used by no one else, and that's a really distinguishing factor. And we also have other distinguishing factors in this uniform, like the incredibly groovy lowercase word mark that's across the chest, and the swoopy front, that's the best word to describe it, swoopy, front panel on the caps. These are incredible. Now, this is what the Padres wear these days, and it's very sad to me because there's nothing that's really distinguishing about this. They're very plain, they're very white, very navy, and for me, it never really speaks to anything having to do with the city of San Diego or the history of the Padres. It's just more, just there. It doesn't really have any story or meaning behind it. So if you're watching this, owners of the Padres / their marketing department / whoever, this is on the internet and you can send it to them. I'm looking at you, wherever the camera is. please go back to this. Or something along these lines, because these uniforms were awesome. They were groovy, they were interesting, they had a story, and above all else, they gave people something to root for. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.